In early 2026, the military forces of the United States and Israel launched a massive preemptive war against the nation of Iran. Historical precedent suggests that when Washington initiates a Middle Eastern offensive, European allies reliably serve as the logistical stepping stones. That reliable cycle was broken in the European Parliament. Spanish MEP Irene Montero took the floor to deliver a blisteringly anti-war speech that directly targeted the Western military momentum. Montero labeled Donald Trump the Hitler of the 21st century. She then directly challenged him to send his own son, Barron, to the front lines, rather than the children of the working class. The clip flooded social media, garnering millions of views, reigniting the no-to-war sentiment that has defined Spanish activism for decades. Within days, this digital pressure forced the ruling coalition to move from rhetoric to a formal executive veto. The immediate consequence of that domestic pressure arrived when Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez officially denied the United States permission to use Spanish military bases for strikes. This executive order closed the gates at two strategic choke points, the naval hub at Rota and the air base at Morón. Logistical data showed the impact instantly. American planes were forced to divert away from the Iberian Peninsula, adding hours to their flight paths as they rerouted toward Ramstein Air Base in Germany. For a NATO ally to intentionally sabotage American military logistics marks a severe rupture in the history of Western military cooperation. This blockade was legally possible because Rota and Morón are jointly operated bases, not sovereign U.S. soil. Under existing bilateral treaties, Spain can demand that all operations comply with international law. Prime Minister Sánchez chose to enforce this legal loophole to satisfy a volatile domestic political landscape. The left-wing Podemos party leveraged their position in the coalition to demand a radical anti-Trump plan, even threatening to push for a total exit from NATO. Right-wing opposition leaders from the PP and Vox parties labeled the move a betrayal, accusing the government of endangering national security by abandoning Spain's primary allies. The crisis proved that military treaties are fragile. They remain entirely beholden to the shifts of local democratic coalitions. While the rhetoric was moral, the underlying motivation for Spain's defiance was a pragmatic defense of their domestic economy. In 2026, Spain entered a golden era, leading Eurozone growth against peers like Germany and France. This boom was driven by record tourism. However, funding a Middle Eastern war would cause energy prices to spike, wiping out these historic GDP gains. Spain's blockade was a calculated economic strategy, an attempt to insulate a national boom from the financial bleed of a foreign war. Spain's hardline stance looks even more distinct when compared to the reactions of other NATO allies. The United Kingdom allowed U.S. bombers to utilize bases like Diego Garcia, even after their own facilities in Cyprus were hit by Iranian retaliatory strikes. Germany maintained a cautious middle ground, rhetorically supporting the U.S. strikes to protect their diplomatic standing in Washington. This lack of a unified response exposes a fragmented NATO, where domestic interests have begun to override collective military strategy. Spain remains isolated in its position, currently weathering threats of trade cuts and diplomatic sanctions from the Trump administration. Montero's viral speech provided the political cover necessary for the government to maintain this executive defiance. The long-term risk for the Pentagon is that this successful blockade could inspire other nations to leverage their own bases as bargaining chips during future conflicts. By successfully denying access to its territory, Madrid has demonstrated that a middle power can decouple its infrastructure from American military goals. This move offers a practical method for European nations to exercise sovereignty outside of the traditional NATO framework.